In the middle of a luxurious dinner celebrating 3 years together at the most exclusive restaurant in New York, a mafia boss almost died in front of everyone. Everything was perfect to a terrifying degree. Candlelight flickering softly, red wine breathing in crystal white roses covering the table, and the woman he had trusted for 3 years smiling right in front of him. But then a small, trembling voice broke through. "Mister, that woman put something in your cake." It was a 6-year-old girl, the daughter of a poor waitress. No one looked at her, no one believed her but him. Dominic Vittorio, a man who had survived more than 2 decades in the underworld, he believed. No questions, no hesitation. In just a few seconds he switched the plates. No one noticed, not a single glance, not a single extra movement. 3 minutes later the dessert was served, 2 cakes identical, one for him, one for her. Vanessa, the woman who had just returned from the restroom, still wearing that perfect smile, still carrying that gentle gaze, completely unaware that the trap she had prepared had turned back on her. 10 minutes passed. She kept smiling, kept talking, kept performing perfectly. 15 minutes, her hand began to tremble. 20 minutes, her face turned pale, her breathing grew uneven, her eyes filled with panic. "Dominic, I don't feel well." He didn't move, he just watched, eyes cold to the bone, then slowly asked, "The thing you put in my dessert, what does it taste like?" In that moment, everything collapsed. The truth was torn open, and the price of betrayal had begun. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the quiet power of kindness, especially when no one else chooses to show it. Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Which city and country are you in, and what time is it there right now? It's always amazing to see how stories like this connect people from all over the world. Is it United States, London? Maybe Canada, Jamaica, South Africa, or anywhere we want to know? And tell us what you learned at the end of this video. If moments like this remind you of the beauty of humanity, please like the video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more powerful stories that celebrate compassion, courage, and the simple acts of kindness that can change a life. In the heart of Manhattan on a crisp October evening in 2025, the city lights glittered like scattered diamonds against the darkening sky. High above the bustling streets, perched on the 60th floor of a gleaming tower overlooking the Hudson River, the most exclusive rooftop restaurant in New York prepared for its most important guest. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow over white linen tablecloths. Fresh white roses, dozens of them, stood in elegant silver vases, their petals catching the flickering candlelight. The air carried the faint scent of aged red wine and expensive cologne. Dominic Vittorio sat at his usual private corner table, his broad shoulders filling the custom-tailored black suit that spoke of quiet power. At 37 years old, fair-skinned with sharp features and steel-gray eyes that had seen too much, Dominic was a man who had built an empire from the unforgiving streets of Brooklyn. Born and raised in a cramped walk-up in Bensonhurst, he now controlled vast construction unions, underground gambling operations, and protection networks that stretched across all 5 boroughs. Politicians sought his favors. Business owners paid their tributes without complaint. In the shadows of New York, Dominic Vittorio was a king. Yet as he stared through the floor-to-ceiling windows at the glittering skyline, a familiar hollow ache settled deep in his chest. He had everything money could buy: penthouses, private cars, influence that could move city contracts with a single phone call. But he had no one who stood beside him simply for who he was. Not for the power, not for the protection, not for the fear. The thought flickered through his mind like a match in the wind, then vanished. In his world, sentiment was a weakness that got men killed. Tonight was supposed to mark 3 years with Vanessa. The restaurant had been closed to all other guests at her request. Everything had been arranged exactly as she wanted. The finest vintage wine breathing in crystal decanters, the soft jazz playing just loud enough to soothe the white roses she loved. Dominic adjusted the cufflinks on his crisp white shirt, his fingers tracing the smooth metal. Old habits from the streets never died. His back remained against the wall, eyes always facing the entrance. 2 bodyguards stood 10 meters away, close enough to act far enough to give the illusion of privacy. A soft chime announced the elevator's arrival. Vanessa entered with the practiced grace of a woman who knew how to command attention. Her crimson dress clung to every curve, the fabric shimmering under the candlelight. Her dark hair fell in sleek waves, and the diamond necklace Dominic had given her last Christmas sparkled at her throat. She was stunning. She had always been stunning. "Darling, you've outdone yourself," she said, leaning down to press a kiss against his cheek, leaving the faint trace of expensive perfume. Her smile was wide, showing perfect white teeth. "Only the best," Dominic replied quietly, rising slightly from his seat in a rare gesture of courtesy. He watched her settle into the chair across from him, her movements fluid and elegant. Yet something felt off tonight. Her eyes flickered briefly to her watch. Her hand touched his arm too many times in the first minute. Her laughter came a fraction too bright when she raised her glass. To 3 wonderful years, she said, her voice sweet as honey. Their glasses clinked. Dominic took a measured sip while Vanessa drank deeply. He studied her face, noting the slight hesitation when he casually asked about her plans for the coming week. Her answers felt rehearsed. The suspicion that had kept him alive for 2 decades stirred in the back of his mind, that familiar whisper warning him that trust was a luxury he could not afford. But he pushed it down. Perhaps he was simply too damaged, too scarred by years of betrayal to recognize genuine affection anymore. The appetizers arrived, carried by a waitress Dominic had not seen before. She was in her late 20s, painfully thin, with blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her uniform hung loosely on her frail frame. Her hands trembled as she placed the plates down, revealing faded bruises on her wrists and dark circles beneath exhausted eyes. She moved with the cautious, apologetic air of someone who had learned to take up as little space as possible. For the briefest moment, something stirred in Dominic's chest, not quite sympathy, but a flicker of recognition. He knew that look. He had worn it himself as a boy in the freezing Brooklyn winters when the heat was shut off and the wind howled through cracked windows. The feeling passed quickly, buried beneath layers of calculated indifference. He turned back to Vanessa and raised his glass once more. In the cramped staff room behind the gleaming kitchen, 6-year-old Sophie Harper sat perfectly still on a plastic chair, her short legs dangling above the floor. A worn coloring book rested in her lap, filled with half-finished princesses and crooked rainbows. Beside her lay Mr. Bear, her threadbare teddy with one button eye, missing her only constant companion. Sophie had learned early that being invisible was a survival skill. Her mother, Lily Harper, had been clear before leaving her here. "Stay quiet, sweetheart. Don't move from this spot. Mommy will come check on you when I can." So Sophie stayed coloring inside the lines as best she could, and hugging Mr. Bear tightly whenever footsteps passed the open door. The kitchen was loud and frightening, pots clanging, chefs shouting, the air thick with smells she could not name. She missed their tiny one-room apartment in Queens, where the walls were thin and the radiator often failed. She missed the faded blanket on the mattress they shared on the floor. Lily had cried quietly that afternoon when the babysitter canceled again. Another missed shift would mean no job. No job meant no food. No food meant the kind of hungry that made Sophie's stomach ache through the long, cold nights. So here they were. Lily worked the floor while Sophie waited, being a good girl, being invisible. But Sophie really needed to use the bathroom. She had waited as long as she could, squeezing her legs together and trying to focus on her coloring. Finally, the pressure became unbearable. Clutching Mr. Bear to her chest, she slipped off the chair and tiptoed into the hallway. The corridor twisted deeper into the building, past storage rooms and humming refrigerators. Everything looked the same: white walls, gray doors, buzzing fluorescent lights. Then she heard voices. A woman's voice sharp and commanding. A man's voice nervous. Sophie froze beside a tall metal shelf stacked with supplies. Through a gap between boxes, she saw 2 figures near the back entrance of the kitchen. One was a chef in white. The other was the pretty lady in the red dress who had kissed the man at the fancy table. "Put this in the dessert for the VIP table," the woman in red said, pressing a thick envelope into the chef's hands. "The man in the black suit. Make sure no one sees." Sophie stopped breathing. She was only 6, but she understood secrets. She understood the heavy feeling in her chest that meant danger. Something bad was about to happen to the man with the sad eyes who sat alone at the big table. The woman in red turned and walked away. The chef disappeared into the kitchen. Sophie remained frozen, her small body trembling. If that man got hurt, would Mommy lose her job? The thought pushed her forward before fear could stop her. She had to tell someone. She had to tell him. Back in the dining room, Dominic felt the weight of his empire pressing down on him. The city stretched endlessly beyond the glass. His city, yet he had never felt more alone. The inner conflict gnawed at him. The boy who once froze in Brooklyn tenements now sat surrounded by luxury he could never have imagined as a child. The guilt of what he had done to reach this height, the remorse for the lives his choices had touched, the violent emotional storm he kept locked behind steel-gray eyes, all of it churned silently inside him. He did not know that in less than an hour, a small, malnourished 6-year-old girl from the poorest corners of Queens would step into his world and change everything. Lily Harper moved between tables like a ghost, her thin frame aching from hours on her feet. Her shoes had holes in the soles. Her coat left in the staff room was too thin for the October wind that would greet her on the long subway ride home. She had not eaten since yesterday morning, giving the last of the bread to Sophie. Humiliation burned in her chest. the knowledge that her daughter was hidden in the back room because she could not afford proper childcare. The unfairness of it all tore at her, working double shifts while barely keeping a roof over their heads, watching other children with warm coats and full lunchboxes while Sophie wore hand-me-downs 2 sizes too big. She glanced toward the VIP table and felt a pang of something she could not name when she saw the powerful man in the black suit. He looked untouchable. She looked away quickly, fear and curiosity mixing in her exhausted heart. What kind of life allowed someone to command an entire restaurant with a single nod, while she and Sophie survived on scraps? The inner turmoil in Lily's heart grew more intense with every passing minute. Desperation clawed at her. She was powerless, poor beyond words, and terrified that one wrong step tonight would cost them everything. Yet somewhere deep inside, a quiet, stubborn resilience refused to die completely. Dominic lifted his wine glass, unaware that fate was already moving through the service corridors in the small, determined form of a child clutching a worn teddy bear. The stage was set. The anniversary dinner continued under soft golden light, but in the shadows of the restaurant, unseen forces were gathering betrayal from within, danger from a ruthless rival, and the innocent courage of a little girl who would soon deliver a warning that would shatter Dominic Vittorio's carefully guarded world. And in that moment, neither the powerful mafia boss nor the destitute single mother could possibly imagine how completely their lives were about to collide. In the crisp October night of 2025, the towering Manhattan restaurant continued its quiet symphony of luxury. Candle flames danced across crystal and silver, while soft jazz drifted through the air like a gentle lullaby. Dominic Vittorio sat motionless at the VIP table, his steel-gray eyes reflecting the glittering Hudson River beyond the glass. The weight of his empire pressed upon him, construction unions that moved millions with a word, gambling operations that generated rivers of cash, and a network of influence that reached City Hall itself. Yet inside his broad chest a storm raged. He had risen from nothing. As a boy in the freezing tenements of Bensonhurst, he had huddled under thin blankets while winter winds howled through cracked windows, his stomach empty more nights than not. Now he commanded tables that cost more in one evening than most families earned in a month. The contrast tore at him violently. Gnawing remorse for the choices that had hardened him into this powerful, feared man clawed at his heart. He had sworn never to be weak again, never to feel the helplessness of poverty. But the hollowness remained a violent, emotional conflict that no amount of wealth could silence. Across the table, Vanessa chatted brightly, her laughter a touch too loud. Dominic nodded at the right moments, but his mind wandered. Something felt wrong tonight. The suspicion that had kept him alive through countless betrayals whispered louder. He pushed it down, telling himself he was simply too broken to trust kindness. In the cramped staff room, 6-year-old Sophie Harper sat hugging Mr. Bear, her small body trembling with urgency. She had waited as long as she could, but nature would not be denied. Slipping off the plastic chair, she clutched her teddy bear tightly and tiptoed into the dimly lit hallway. The corridor twisted past storage shelves and humming refrigerators. White walls and gray doors blurred together under buzzing fluorescent lights. Sophie's heart pounded like a trapped bird. She turned a corner and froze. Voices drifted from near the back entrance. A woman's sharp, commanding tone and a man's nervous reply. Through a narrow gap between stacked boxes, Sophie saw them clearly. The pretty lady in the crimson dress who had kissed the sad-eyed man at the fancy table stood facing a chef in white. "Put this in the dessert for the VIP table," the woman said, pressing a thick envelope into the chef's hands. "The man in the black suit. Make sure no one sees. And use the little brown bottle exactly as I showed you." Sophie stopped breathing. She was only 6, but she understood secrets and danger. She had heard her mother's voice change when bills could not be paid. She had felt the heavy dread in her own chest during cold nights when the heat never came on. This was bad. Something terrible was about to happen to the powerful man with the lonely eyes. The woman in red turned sharply. For one terrifying second, Sophie thought those cold eyes would find her hiding spot. But the lady walked past without looking heels, clicking away toward the dining room. The chef stared at the envelope, then slipped the small brown bottle into his pocket and vanished into the kitchen. Sophie remained pressed against the cold metal shelf, her thin legs shaking. Tears welled in her green eyes. If that man got hurt, would Mommy lose her job? Would they have to sleep on the street again like last winter when the landlord changed the locks? The thought propelled her forward before fear could chain her in place. Mommy always said, "Always tell the truth, baby, even when you're scared." Clutching Mr. Bear so tightly his worn fabric threatened to tear, Sophie crept through the service corridor. Her worn sneakers made no sound on the polished floor. She was invisible, the skill she had learned from years of being hungry and unnoticed. Every instinct screamed at her to run back to the staff room and hide. but the image of the brown bottle and the envelope full of money burned in her young mind. She reached the edge of the dining room and peered around the corner. The restaurant stretched before her like a scene from a fairy tale she had only seen in library books. Soft, golden light, white flowers everywhere, elegant people eating from plates that sparkled. And there he was. The man in the black suit sat alone at his corner table, gazing out at the dark water beyond the windows. The pretty lady in red was gone, having stepped away moments earlier. This was her chance. Maybe her only chance. Sophie took a deep breath and stepped into the dining room. She moved between tables like a ghost head down, avoiding the eyes of the beautifully dressed guests who barely noticed the small, thin child in a faded sweater 2 sizes too big. Her steps were silent. She was invisible until the bodyguard blocked her path. "Hey, kid, this area is restricted." His low voice was sharp. Sophie looked up at the giant man, her eyes filling with tears she could not stop. "Please," she whispered, her voice soft, timid, and polite, the way she spoke to adults when she was frightened. "I need to talk to that man. Please. It's important." The bodyguard's expression remained hard. "You need to leave now." But a deep, calm voice cut through the tension. "Let her through." The bodyguard turned surprised. Behind him, Dominic Vittorio had risen slightly from his seat, his steel-gray eyes fixed on the trembling child with unsettling intensity. Something dangerous and calculating assessed her, yet beneath it stirred an unexpected flicker recognition of suffering he once knew too well. Boss, the bodyguard hesitated. "Let her through." The giant stepped aside reluctantly. Sophie felt the weight of 100 curious gazes as she approached the VIP table. Her thin legs carried her forward until she stood before the most powerful man in the room. Up close, he was even more intimidating. Sharp jaw, faint scar along one cheek, eyes the color of winter storms. He looked at her the way wolves might look at rabbits. Sophie swallowed hard. The words tumbled out in a desperate rush, tripping over each other. "Mr. The lady in the red dress put something bad in your cake. I saw her in the kitchen. She gave money to the cook and a little brown bottle and told him to put it in your dessert. The VIP table. The man in the black suit. That's you." Silence fell like a heavy curtain. Dominic's expression did not change. Not a flicker. His face remained carved from stone. Inside, however, a violent storm erupted. Who sent this child? A rival testing him, a trap to make him paranoid. Yet, as he studied her tear-streaked cheeks, trembling lips, and wide green eyes filled with pure, undiluted terror, there was no deception. No rehearsed lines, just a frightened little girl telling the truth. His survival instincts, sharpened over decades in the underworld, screamed one clear word: believe her. But deeper still, something else stirred. A gnawing remorse for the boy he had once been cold and hungry on Brooklyn streets, and a sudden overwhelming surge of protectiveness toward this small, malnourished child who had risked everything to warn a stranger. The emotion hit him with shocking intensity, passionate and burning from the very first moment. He who trusted no one felt an instant fierce attachment to this vulnerable girl. It terrified him. It tore at his heart with violent conflict. How could a child so poor, so powerless, show more courage than the people who claimed to love him? "Thank you, Dominic," said quietly, his voice gentler than he intended. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a crisp $100 bill, placing it carefully in Sophie's small, cold hand and curling her fingers around it. "Go back to your mother. Don't tell anyone what you saw. Do you understand?" Sophie nodded frantically, tears spilling down her cheeks. Then she ran faster than she had ever run in her short life, clutching the money and Mr. Bear against her chest, weaving between tables until the service door swallowed her. Dominic sat very still. Inside, the emotional upheaval raged. This child had saved him, or tried to, with nothing but honesty. The remorse for his own hardened life clashed violently with the sudden burning need to protect her. He who had built walls of steel and fear felt them crack at the sight of her thin frame and frightened eyes. The disparity tore him apart, his world of limitless wealth against her obvious poverty. He had noticed the waitress earlier, the girl's mother, no doubt, thin, exhausted, moving as if every step caused pain. Now the child's courage made the contrast unbearable. Meanwhile, in the staff room, Lily Harper had heard the rising commotion from the dining room. Her heart lurched with anxiety. She abandoned her tray and ran, shoving past confused co-workers. Terrible images flashed through her mind. Sophie, hurt, lost, or worse. She burst through the staff room door and found her daughter huddled in the corner, clutching Mr. Bear, tears streaming down her pale face. "Sophie." Lily dropped to her knees and pulled her daughter into her arms, holding her so tightly the girl squeaked. "Are you okay? Did something happen? Did anyone hurt you?" Sophie shook her head against her mother's shoulder. Then, in a whisper so quiet, Lily almost missed it, Mommy, did I do something bad? Before Lily could answer, a shadow fell across the doorway. She looked up to find one of Dominic's security men watching them, his expression unreadable. Mrs. Harper, you need to come with me. Both of you. Lily's world tilted. Horror, anxiety, and deep disorientation washed over her. Dizziness made her vision blur. Numbness spread through her limbs. She clutched Sophie closer, her thin arms trembling. What had her daughter done? Why were these powerful men interested in them? She was powerless, destitute beyond words, a single mother who had spent too many cold October nights walking the windy streets of Queens because the subway fare was too expensive, her coat too thin, her stomach empty, so Sophie could eat. The humiliation burned, sleeping on the floor of their tiny room, rationing every penny, enduring the pitying or contemptuous looks from neighbors who knew she could barely keep the lights on. Now this, sudden attention from a world of unimaginable wealth. Confusion and fear tore at her heart with violent intensity. Yet somewhere beneath the terror, a timid curiosity flickered. Who was this man her daughter had approached, and why did his eyes look so sad? The inner turmoil in Lily's heart grew increasingly intense as she was escorted through the elegant corridors. She felt small, malnourished, sleep-deprived, and utterly out of place among the marble and crystal. Absurdly unfair events had defined her life, losing her job at the factory when the owner closed without notice. Medical bills that piled up when Sophie had a bad fever last winter. Landlords who raised rent while her wages stayed the blank. Same. Each injustice stripped her bare, leaving her desperate and powerless. Yet as she held Sophie close, a quiet, condensed, emotional stillness settled for one brief moment. Her daughter was safe. For now. Dominic, still at the table, watched the dessert arrive, 2 identical chocolate creations. Without hesitation, in a movement so fluid it was invisible to others, he switched the plates. His heartbeat remained steady, but inside the violent emotional conflict raged. The child's warning had ignited something fierce and protective, an overwhelming attachment that burned from the first moment he looked into her frightened eyes. He who had known only betrayal felt a sudden passionate trust toward this small girl, and by extension the exhausted mother who had raised her in such poverty. The drama was only beginning. Outside the restaurant in the shadowed Manhattan streets, Dominic's men had already begun quiet confrontations with scouts from Victor Kane's rival faction, tense exchanges of words and veiled threats near loading docks and dimly lit alleys heightening the suspense without open violence. Kane's people were testing boundaries, probing for weakness. Dominic's orders were clear: protect the child witness at all costs. As chaos began to erupt in the dining room when Vanessa collapsed, Dominic rose calmly, issuing commands that locked down the entire establishment. His steel-gray eyes scanned the room until they found the service corridor where Lily and Sophie had been taken. The disparity between his world and theirs tore at him with renewed violence. He had everything. They had nothing. And yet a 6-year-old girl from the depths of poverty had shown him more loyalty in one moment than anyone in his empire ever had. The inner tearing in Dominic's heart grew more intense with every passing second. Remorse for the boy he once was. Guilt for the man he had become. And a burning, overwhelming need to shield this vulnerable child and her mother from the darkness he knew too well. Little did he know how completely this small act of courage would reshape his lonely empire and begin to heal the wounds he had carried since those cold Brooklyn nights so many years ago. The elegant dining room of the Manhattan rooftop restaurant, bathed in soft golden candlelight on that October evening in 2025, shattered in an instant. Screams erupted as Vanessa collapsed forward onto the table. Crystal glasses shattered. Red wine spilled across the white linen like dark stains, and the carefully arranged white roses scattered their petals, drifting down around her motionless form. Guests stumbled over chairs in panic, waiters dropped trays with clattering porcelain, and the once serene space dissolved into pandemonium. Dominic Vittorio rose from his seat with calm authority, his steel-gray eyes scanning the chaos without a trace of fear. "Call an ambulance," he commanded, his deep voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Lock the kitchen doors. No one leaves this building." His bodyguards moved instantly, barking orders into radios while additional security materialized from the shadows to seal every exit. Within moments, the frantic movement froze into terrified stillness. Everyone present understood instinctively that defying this man carried consequences far beyond a ruined evening. Inside Dominic's chest, the violent, emotional conflict raged with growing intensity. The little girl's warning had proven true. The woman who had shared his life for 3 years had tried to end it. Gnawing remorse tore at him, remorse for the years he had allowed himself to believe in her affection, for the walls he had built so high that even genuine care might never reach him. He had risen from the freezing Brooklyn tenements, where hunger gnawed nightly and thin blankets offered no warmth against the wind. Now surrounded by luxury that could buy entire neighborhoods, he felt the old helplessness clash violently with his hard-won power. How had he let betrayal creep so close? The burning attachment he had felt toward the small child who warned him only deepened the turmoil. A fierce protective instinct that had ignited the moment he looked into Sophie's frightened green eyes. He wanted to shield her from this world of shadows, yet his own empire had drawn danger straight to her. Paramedics arrived swiftly, working on Vanessa, while Dominic stood watch, his face carved from stone. He had not touched her. He offered no words of comfort. His phone was already at his ear. "Marcus, get here now." 20 minutes later, Marcus Webb, his most trusted advisor, a former military man with sharp eyes and quiet precision, strode into the lockdown restaurant. "Talk to me," Marcus said, surveying the scene. "She tried to poison me," Dominic replied, his voice low and controlled. "The child warned me in time. I switched the plates." The words carried the weight of betrayal, but beneath them churned deeper torment. He had believed in connection, however fragile. Now that illusion lay broken, reminding him of every loss since childhood. His mother's weary struggles, the nights when eviction notices came, the cold wind that cut through threadbare coats. The disparity sickened him. He commanded wealth that could end poverty for dozens of families, yet one small girl and her mother lived on the edge of nothing. Marcus absorbed the information without visible reaction. "How do you know it was her?" "A witness. A child." Dominic's eyes flickered toward the service corridor. "Find out who is behind this. You have 1 hour." The investigation unfolded with ruthless efficiency. Security footage from the critical window had been wiped. The chef who received the bribe had vanished through a back exit. In the kitchen trash, investigators found the small brown bottle with foreign markings. Marcus brought it to Dominic, holding it carefully. "Russian connections. Victor Kane." The name landed like ice in Dominic's veins. Victor Kane, the ruthless rival, expanding aggressively into New York's construction unions and underground gambling circles, testing boundaries and waiting for any sign of weakness. Dominic's hands curled into fists, the inner tearing intensified. Remorse for allowing a traitor so close mixed with violent resolve. He had built this empire to escape poverty's grip. Yet the same hunger for control had blinded him. And now an innocent child from the poorest corners of Queens stood in the crossfire. In the small manager's office, Lily Harper sat clutching Sophie tightly. The 6-year-old had stopped crying but kept her face buried against her mother's thin shoulder, small fingers gripping the faded uniform. Lily's heart hammered with horror and anxiety. She had always been desperate and powerless, a single mother enduring the absolute extremity of poverty in a cramped one-room apartment in Jackson Heights. Nights of bitter October wind whistled through ill-fitting windows while she wrapped Sophie in the only blanket they owned, her own coat too thin to block the cold. She skipped meals so her daughter could eat, worked double shifts with holes in her shoes, and faced humiliating rejections at food banks when lines were too long or paperwork missing. Sleep came in fitful hours on a thin mattress on the floor. Unreasonable and unjust events had defined her life, a factory closure that left her without notice, medical bills from Sophie's childhood illnesses that piled up despite her endless overtime landlords who raised rent while her wages stayed frozen. Each blow stripped her bare, leaving her malnourished, sleep-deprived, and drowning in quiet despair. Now this. Powerful men in dark suits had escorted them here, away from the screams and shattering glass. Confusion and deep disorientation washed over Lily. Dizziness made the room tilt. Numbness spread through her limbs. Why were they involved? What had Sophie seen? Fear clawed at her, fear for her daughter's safety. Fear that this sudden attention from a world of unimaginable wealth would only bring more danger. Yet beneath the terror, a timid curiosity flickered. The man her daughter had warned. His eyes had held a sadness she recognized from her own mirror. When the door opened, and Dominic stepped inside, Lily's breath caught. He filled the doorway like a force of nature, tall, broad-shouldered, radiating quiet power in his tailored suit. Power that could command restaurants, influence city contracts, and protect or destroy with a word. Lily instinctively shifted, placing herself between Sophie and this stranger, her thin arms tightening protectively. She was guarded, fearful, yet something in his gaze, not cruelty but a haunted depth, stirred an unexpected flicker of trust. Dominic crouched slowly so his eyes were level with Sophie's. The little girl flinched but did not look away. "You were very brave," he said quietly, his voice softer than expected. "Most adults would not have done what you did." Sophie sniffled. "Are you mad at me?" "No." The word emerged gentler than Dominic intended. Gratitude and that fierce burning attachment surged again, passionate and intense from the first moment he had seen her courage. This small, thin child from extreme poverty had risked everything for a stranger. The contrast tore at him violently. His penthouses overlooked the glittering skyline while Lily and Sophie endured cold nights and empty cupboards. Remorse gnawed deeper. He had sworn to rise above the helplessness of his own childhood, yet here was a mother and child living the same nightmare he had escaped. The need to protect them overwhelmed him, clashing with the violent emotional conflict of his world. A world that had just tried to kill him and now threatened them. Lily watched in stunned silence, horror mixed with shock. This powerful man was speaking gently to her daughter. Confusion numbed her thoughts. She, who had faced so many absurdly unfair hardships, eviction threats when rent was late by a single day, judgmental stares at the food pantry, the pain of watching Sophie wear hand-me-downs while other children had warm coats now, sat in a room where wealth dripped from every surface. The disparity made her dizzy. Part of her wanted to flee to return to the known misery of their tiny apartment. Another part, small and trembling, felt the first fragile thread of overwhelming trust and attachment. Someone strong had noticed them. Someone with the power to shield them from the wind and hunger. Dominic rose and faced Lily. "The people who tried to hurt me tonight will want to know who warned me. Your daughter will be in danger. Both of you will." Lily shook her head frantically, her voice soft, timid, and polite despite the storm inside. "We don't have anything to do with this. We're nobody. I'm just a waitress." "I know," Dominic said. His expression remained composed, but inside the conflict raged remorse for the danger his life had brought to their door, burning determination to protect this vulnerable family. "But you are involved now. You'll stay under my protection until this is resolved. My men will take you somewhere safe tonight." Lily's world spun. Anxiety and fear collided with deep disorientation. She clutched Sophie closer, feeling the girl's thin frame against her own malnourished body. What choice did she have? Refusal could mean losing everything, the only job keeping them from the streets, the fragile roof over their heads. Quiet emotional stillness settled for one condensed moment as she looked at her daughter's tear-streaked face. Sophie had been so brave. Perhaps, just perhaps, this was a chance for safety. Outside in the shadowed Manhattan streets below the tower, tense confrontations unfolded. Dominic's men encountered scouts from Victor Kane's faction near loading docks, and dimly lit alleys bold exchanges of words, veiled threats about territory and witnesses without open violence. The air crackled with suspense. Kane was probing, searching for the child who had ruined his plan. Dominic's orders were absolute: no one touches the girl or her mother. As Lily and Sophie were escorted through private corridors to a waiting vehicle, the drama escalated in Lily's heart. She felt powerless, desperate, and utterly out of place in this sudden world of luxury. Yet the overwhelming surge of trust toward the man who had listened to her daughter, and the fierce attachment she sensed in his quiet resolve, began to burn through the fear. It was confusing, numbing, and violently tearing at her inner world. From suspicion to a passionate protective hope, the emotions clashed. She had endured too many cold winds and empty nights. Now a powerful stranger offered shelter. Dominic watched them leave from a distance, his steel-gray eyes shadowed. The child's courage and the mother's quiet strength had cracked something deep inside him. Remorse for his isolated life mixed with violent determination. He would protect them. He would shield this small family from the darkness he knew too well. The hollow ache that had haunted him for years felt for the first time as though it might one day heal not through power but through the innocent warning of a 6-year-old girl from the depths of poverty. The night air carried the crisp chill of October as the city lights glittered on. Betrayal had been revealed. Chaos had erupted. But in the quiet aftermath, new bonds, fragile yet fiercely protective, had begun to form. The black SUV glided through the October night of 2025, carrying Lily Harper and her daughter Sophie away from the chaos of the Manhattan rooftop restaurant. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows as they crossed the bridge into Brooklyn Heights. Lily sat rigidly, her thin arms wrapped around Sophie, who had finally fallen into an exhausted sleep against her shoulder. The vehicle's leather seats felt impossibly soft compared to the lumpy mattress on the floor of their one-room apartment in Jackson Heights. When the elevator doors opened directly into the private penthouse, on one of the highest floors of a gleaming tower, Lily's world tilted once more. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a breathtaking 360-degree panorama of the New York skyline. Manhattan's glittering towers, the dark ribbon of the East River, and the distant lights of Queens, where their tiny, drafty apartment waited. European white oak floors gleamed underfoot. Mahogany millwork and sculptural stone details spoke of effortless luxury. A kitchen larger than their entire living space boasted marble countertops and appliances that looked untouched. The air carried a faint, clean scent of fresh linen and subtle citrus, nothing like the damp mildew and cooking odors that clung to their building. Lily stood frozen in the entryway, clutching her worn purse, the only possession they had been allowed to bring. Her coat was too thin for the October wind that would have met them on the long subway ride home. She had not eaten properly in days, giving the last bites to Sophie. Her shoes had holes worn through from endless shifts on her feet. Humiliation burned in her chest as she took in the sprawling space. White leather sofas, glass tables, abstract art on walls that seemed to stretch forever. This was not her world. She belonged in cramped rooms where the radiator clanked uselessly on cold nights, where wind whistled through cracks, and she lay awake listening to her daughter's hungry whimpers. Sophie stirred and slipped from her arms, her small sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. "Mommy, look. The windows go all the way up to the sky." The girl pressed her hands against the glass, leaving tiny fingerprints. For a moment, wonder lit her tired green eyes. One of the security men stepped forward, a younger guard named Thomas with military posture and a granite-hard face softened slightly by kindness. "Mrs. Harper, I'm Thomas. I'll be your primary security detail. There's food in the refrigerator. Clothes have been provided in the master bedroom in various sizes, until we can get your measurements. The boss wanted to ensure you and your daughter are comfortable." Comfortable. The word felt foreign. Lily laughed bitterly, the sound cracking in her throat. "Comfortable. Your boss is someone important. And now my daughter is caught in whatever this is because she tried to do the right thing." Her voice was soft and timid, polite even in exhaustion, the way she spoke to landlords or supervisors who held her fragile livelihood in their hands. Thomas met her gaze steadily. "I've worked for Mr. Vittorio for years. He doesn't hurt women or children. Ever. That's one line he's never crossed. You're the mother of the girl who saved his life. In his world, that means something. He'll protect you both with everything he has." Lily wanted to argue. She wanted to scream that she needed no protection from monsters, only a steady paycheck and a warm place for Sophie to sleep. But the words died. She had no money, no powerful friends, no safety net. The absurdly unfair events of her life flashed through her mind, the factory that closed without warning, leaving her jobless. The medical bills from Sophie's fever last winter that still haunted her. The landlord who changed the locks one bitter night when rent was 3 days late, forcing them to sleep in a shelter where cold drafts cut through thin blankets. Each injustice had left her more desperate, more powerless, more humiliated. Thin and malnourished. She often skipped meals so Sophie could eat. Sleep-deprived from double shifts and worry, she endured many nights of biting October wind on the walk home when subway fare ran short. Yet in this moment of quiet, condensed emotional stillness, as Sophie explored the vast living room with wide-eyed awe, Lily felt the first fragile thread of overwhelming trust. The powerful man who had listened to her daughter's warning offered shelter when no one else would. Suspicion still lingered, guarded and fearful, but a passionate, intense attachment burning from the first glimpse of his haunted eyes began to take root. He had noticed them. He had acted. Sophie tugged at her hand. "Mommy, why do you look sad? This place is like a castle in the stories." Lily knelt, brushing a strand of blonde hair from her daughter's face. Her voice remained soft and polite. "I'm just tired, sweetheart. It's been a long night." Inside, violent inner conflict tore at her horror at being pulled into a dangerous world, anxiety for Sophie's safety, deep disorientation that left her dizzy and numb. How had their pitiful life of cold winds and empty cupboards collided with such overwhelming wealth and protection? Later that night, after tucking Sophie into the enormous bed with silk sheets that probably cost more than a month's rent, Lily stood at the window staring at the glittering city. Below, somewhere out there, dangerous men hunted because of what Sophie had seen. The only barrier between her daughter and harm was a mafia boss with sad eyes and blood on his hands, or so the whispers suggested. Confusion and fear made her chest tighten painfully. Yet curiosity burned too. Who was Dominic Vittorio really? A man who commanded luxury but carried the same loneliness she recognized from her own mirror. The next morning brought Sophie's best friend into the picture. Mia Torres, 7 years old, a vulnerable Puerto Rican-American girl from the same struggling Queens neighborhood, had been dropped off earlier by a relative after the chaos. Mia lived with an unreliable aunt after losing her parents young. She knew the sting of poverty well, hand-me-down clothes nights when the heat failed, and the fear of being forgotten. Mia eyed the penthouse with suspicion, her small arms crossed. When Sophie excitedly showed her the massive windows and the soft carpets, Mia pulled her friend aside. "Sophie, don't trust him," she whispered fiercely. "He's one of those scary rich men like the ones who hurt families in our building. They act nice, but then bad things happen. Remember what happened to my aunt's friend. Stay close to your mom. This isn't safe. Sophie tilted her head confused. But he said thank you. And he gave me money for mommy. He looked sad, like when you miss someone. The tension between the girls created quiet conflict in the sunlit living room. Lily watched from the kitchen where she had hesitantly prepared simple toast from the stocked refrigerator food more abundant than she had seen in months. Her heart ached with pity for Mia, another child enduring the same humiliating poverty, thin from skipped meals, sleep-deprived from noisy apartments, facing cold winds without proper coats. The disparity tore at Lily violently. Here they stood in a palace of marble and glass, while their old life offered only despair and injustice. Dominic arrived without warning that afternoon, an old habit born from never trusting announced visits. The elevator chimed softly. Thomas straightened immediately. Dominic's eyes found Sophie first, who was drawing at a low table with crayons scattered like fallen leaves. She looked up and smiled shyly. "Mister, you came back." The simple words hit Dominic like a physical blow. No calculation, no hidden agenda, just genuine happiness from a child who had nothing. Inside, the emotional upheaval intensified gnawing remorse for the lonely boy he had been in Bensonhurst. Violent conflict between his hardened empire and this sudden burning protectiveness. He had escaped poverty's grip through power and fear, yet this small girl and her mother reminded him of everything he had lost. The attachment he felt toward them, passionate and fierce from the first moment of Sophie's warning, clashed with the danger his world brought. He wanted to shield them, to erase the cold nights and empty stomachs they had known. He crouched beside Sophie, examining her crayon drawing of a tall building and a small figure waving from a window. "That's very good," he said quietly. Mia hung back, distrust clear in her eyes. "Sophie, be careful," she muttered. The words created a small, tense moment, the vulnerable best friend warning against the powerful stranger, highlighting the deeper truths of disadvantaged children who learned early not to trust those with power. Lily approached hesitantly, her voice soft and timid. "Mr. Vittorio, thank you for the food and the clothes." She felt guarded, fearful yet curiosity, and the first stirrings of overwhelming trust made her heart race. This man, with his wealth displayed in every detail of the penthouse, had pulled them from the brink. The inner tearing grew more intense, shock at her sudden safety numbness from the rapid change pain from years of absurdly unfair hardships that had left her malnourished and exhausted. Dominic nodded, his steel-gray eyes holding hers for a long moment. He saw her exhaustion, the thin frame, the quiet strength beneath the fear. The contrast with his own life, private jet's influence that moved city security that never slept, made remorse surge violently. He had once been desperately poor. Now he could protect those who still suffered as he once had. Outside in the streets, far below, tense confrontations continued. Dominic's men encountered Kane's scouts in unexpected alleys near the waterfront. Bold verbal exchanges and veiled warnings about territory and loose ends, heightening suspense without open violence. Kane was searching for the witness. Dominic's orders remained firm. The child and her mother were untouchable. In the penthouse, a quiet, condensed emotional stillness settled as Sophie offered Dominic a crayon. "Draw with me." For the first time in years, the powerful man felt the hollow ache ease, if only slightly. The drama of protection had begun, laced with tension from Mia's distrust and Lily's guarded heart. Yet beneath it all burned a fierce protective attachment, a bridge forming between extreme poverty and immense wealth, between isolation and the first fragile threads of healing. The October sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the skyline. Safety was temporary, danger loomed. But in this gilded space, a small girl's courage had sparked something profound in a man who had long forgotten how to hope. The days in the Brooklyn Heights penthouse blurred together in the crisp October air of 2025, each one carrying the weight of fragile new routines amid the ever-present shadow of danger. Dominic Vittorio arrived more frequently. Now his visits no longer announced, slipping in like a quiet storm. The towering glass windows captured the changing light over the Manhattan skyline, turning the vast living space into a golden sanctuary during the day and a glittering jewel at night. White leather sofas, sleek glass tables, and abstract paintings that cost more than most families earned. In a lifetime surrounded them a world of effortless wealth that stood in brutal contrast to the life Lily Harper and Sophie had known. Lily moved through the penthouse like a ghost at first, her thin frame still tense with guarded fear. She was desperately impoverished, powerless in ways that cut deep. Back in their Jackson Heights apartment, she had endured too many nights, when the wind howled through cracked windows and the radiator stayed cold, wrapping Sophie in the only blanket. while her own coat offered little protection against the Wunshan, biting October chill. She had gone days with barely enough food, giving every scrap to her daughter, her body growing thinner and more malnourished with each passing month. Sleep came in fitful fragments after double shifts, her shoes worn through from endless hours on her feet. Unreasonable and unjust hardships had piled upon her, a landlord who evicted them without proper notice. When rent was late by a single week, food pantry lines that turned her away for missing paperwork, medical clinics that demanded payment. She could not provide when Sophie caught a bad cold last winter. Each blow left her humiliated, numb, and drowning in quiet despair. Yet here in this palace of marble and light meals appeared abundantly. Clothes and soft fabrics replaced her threadbare uniform. Sophie's laughter echoed through rooms larger than their entire previous home. In these moments of quiet, condensed emotional stillness, Lily would stand at the window at dusk, watching the city lights flicker on, and feel the first overwhelming surge of trust. It burned intensely. From the very first night, a passionate attachment to the man who had listened to her daughter's warning and offered shelter when no one else would. Suspicion still lingered, fearful and confused, but it warred with deep curiosity and a growing sense of safety. At times, dizziness and numbness would wash over her when she remembered how powerless she truly was. A single mother suddenly protected by a wealthy, powerful stranger whose world she barely understood. Sophie adapted with the resilience only a child could possess. She explored every corner, naming the goldfish in the small indoor fountain and pressing her hands against the glass to watch boats on the river. Her crayon drawings multiplied crude but heartfelt images of tall buildings, a man in a black suit, and a little girl waving from a high window. One afternoon, Dominic found her at the low table, crayons scattered like fallen autumn leaves. "Mr. Look," Sophie said softly, holding up a drawing. Her voice was timid and polite, the way she spoke to adults who seemed important. "That's you. I made you smiling because you looked sad at the restaurant." Dominic crouched beside her, his broad shoulders casting a shadow over the paper. The simple stick figure with square shoulders and dark hair carried an unexpected weight. Inside his chest, violent inner conflict tore at him with increasing intensity. He had built an empire from the freezing tenements of Bensonhurst, where hunger gnawed constantly and thin blankets offered no defense against winter winds. He had sworn never to be weak again, rising through construction unions and underground networks until politicians sought his favors and entire blocks paid tribute. Yet remorse gnawed relentlessly. Remorse for the boy who once shivered in the cold, for the choices that had hardened him into a man feared across the 5 boroughs. The burning attachment he felt toward this small girl had ignited the moment she whispered her warning. It was passionate and fierce, a protective love that clashed violently with the danger his life brought. How could a child from such poverty show him more loyalty than anyone in his world of power? "You think I look sad?" he asked quietly, his steel-gray eyes softening. Sophie nodded gravely, like Mommy when she thinks I'm sleeping and cries about the cold nights. "But now we're warm. Thank you." The words pierced him. Gnawing remorse surged for every night Lily and Sophie had endured the wind and hunger while he sat in penthouses overlooking the same city. The disparity tore at his heart with violent force. His wealth was displayed in every detail, the private security, the stocked kitchen that could feed a neighborhood, the clothes provided without question. He could end their suffering with a word, yet his empire had nearly destroyed them. Lily watched from the doorway, her thin hands twisting together. Confusion and anxiety made her chest tighten. She felt guarded, fearful of this powerful man whose presence filled the room, yet curiosity burned brighter each day. His gentleness with Sophie stirred something deep, an overwhelming trust that left her dizzy with disorientation. She who had faced so many absurdly unfair events, losing wages when shifts were cut without notice, standing in lines for assistance only to be turned away for minor paperwork errors, now lived in luxury she could never have imagined. The inner tearing grew more intense. Part of her wanted to flee back to the known misery of poverty. Another part, passionate and intense, felt the first fragile bonds of attachment to the man who offered protection without demand. Mia Torres, Sophie's loyal best friend, remained a source of tension. The 7-year-old watched Dominic with wary eyes, her small frame tense whenever he entered the room. "Sophie, be careful," she whispered during one quiet afternoon while they colored together. "He's rich and scary. Men like him make promises and then bad things happen. My aunt says people with big houses forget about kids like us." Mia's words carried the weight of her own hardships, nights in a noisy apartment, with unreliable heat meals that sometimes never came, the fear of being forgotten after losing her parents. Her distrust created small emotional conflicts that highlighted the deeper truths of disadvantaged children who learned early to guard their hearts. Dominic noticed. He did not push. Instead, he arranged quietly for Mia's aunt to receive medical help for a lingering illness, an anonymous gesture handled through Thomas. When Mia later discovered fresh groceries and warm coats delivered to their old neighborhood apartment, her suspicion cracked. One evening, as rain pattered against the windows, Mia found Dominic reading a simple story to Sophie. The girl hesitated, then stepped closer. "You helped my aunt," she said softly. Maybe you're not so scary." It was a small turning point born of observed kindness rather than force. Outside the penthouse, suspense built through tense street confrontations. Dominic's men encountered Victor Kane's scouts in unexpected locations, a shadowed alley near the waterfront where words were exchanged sharply about territory, and witnesses a bold confrontation at a loading dock where veiled threats hung in the October air without escalating to violence. Kane was searching relentlessly for the child who had ruined his plan. Each encounter heightened the quiet drama, reminding Dominic of the danger shadowing the two girls and their mother. His orders remained absolute: protect them at all costs. In the quiet evenings after Sophie and Mia had been tucked into bed, Lily and Dominic sometimes shared moments of condensed emotional stillness in the living room. Lily's voice stayed soft and timid when she spoke. "Mr. Vittorio, why are you doing this for us? We have nothing to offer." Dominic looked at her, seeing the exhaustion etched into her thin face, the quiet strength that had kept her daughter alive through years of cold winds and empty cupboards. Violent conflict raged within him, remorse for the isolated life he had chosen, the boy who once knew poverty now sitting in unimaginable wealth while others still suffered. The attachment he felt toward Lily and Sophie burned passionately from the first night. It was not romance, but a deep protective compassion, a fierce need to heal the wounds he recognized from his own past. "Your daughter saved me with nothing but courage," he said quietly. "In my world, loyalty like that is rare. I protect what matters." Lily felt a wave of shock and deep disorientation. Dizziness made the room tilt momentarily. She, who had endured so many humiliating hardships, sleeping on the floor when the bed broke, rationing every penny while watching other mothers buy warm coats for their children, now sat protected by a man whose power could move cities. The inner tearing intensified, violently numbing her thoughts with confusion and fear, yet beneath it swelled an overwhelming surge of trust and attachment. Someone strong saw their worth. Someone powerful chose compassion. One afternoon, as golden October light streamed through the windows, Sophie climbed into Dominic's lap with Mr. Bear and a new drawing. "This is us," she said, simply pointing to the figures. "You, me, Mommy, and Mia. Safe." Dominic held the paper carefully as if it were fragile glass. The innocent gesture cracked something deep inside him. Gnawing remorse for years of emotional isolation clashed with the healing warmth of the child's trust. He had escaped poverty through power and fear. Now these two girls, one his unexpected savior, the other her loyal friend and their resilient mother, were teaching him what true strength looked like. Lily watched from across the room, tears glistening in her eyes. The disparity between their old life of wind-filled nights and empty stomachs, and this new reality of safety and abundance, left her heart aching with violent emotion. Yet in the quiet stillness, hope began to bloom, fragile, tentative, but real. The bonding had begun. Small healing moments accumulated like drops of rain on the penthouse glass, Sophie's drawings. Mia's gradual softening, Lily's timid gratitude. Outside, Kane's men continued their tense probes in the streets below, but inside the tower, a powerful man's hardened heart felt the first gentle cracks of light. The October winds might still howl through poorer neighborhoods, but for Lily, Sophie, and Mia, a different kind of shelter had been offered, one built not just on wealth, but on the courage of a small girl and the quiet compassion awakening in a once lonely king of the shadows. As October deepened in 2025, the secure penthouse in Brooklyn Heights became both sanctuary and gilded cage for Lily Harper and the two girls. The sprawling space, with its panoramic views of the glittering Manhattan skyline, offered comforts unimaginable in their old life. Soft beds, abundant food, and warmth that chased away the memory of biting winds whistling through cracked windows. Yet outside, danger escalated relentlessly. Victor Kane's men probed Dominic Vittorio's territory, with increasing boldness, searching for the child witness who had ruined their carefully laid plan. Dominic moved through the days with calculated precision, his steel-gray eyes carrying the weight of an empire built on construction unions, underground gambling networks, and influence that reached deep into the 5 boroughs. His wealth was displayed with growing intensity, private security details rotating in shifts, vehicles that moved silently through the city, resources that could reshape neighborhoods with a single decision. Yet inside, the violent emotional conflict raged harder than ever. He had risen from the freezing tenements of Bensonhurst, where hunger was a constant companion and thin blankets offered no shield against winter nights. Remorse gnawed at him relentlessly for the boy he once was, cold, powerless, desperate. Now he commanded power that could protect or destroy, but the hollow ache remained. The burning attachment he felt towards Sophie and Lily ignited the moment the small girl whispered her warning clashed violently with the danger his world had brought to their door. He wanted to shield them completely, to erase every humiliating night of cold wind and empty cupboards they had endured. The disparity tore at his heart, his limitless resources against their years of malnourished thinness, sleep-deprived exhaustion, and absurdly unfair hardships. One crisp afternoon, Dominic set his trap. He gathered his inner circle in a private meeting room downtown, delivering 4 carefully crafted lies about a new safe location for the witnesses. Each version contained the same core details, but with different addresses and timings. Marcus received coordinates for an abandoned warehouse in an industrial zone. Thomas was told of a quiet farmhouse upstate. Another trusted advisor learned of an apartment complex in a different borough. The 4th man, a longtime financial handler, received details of a lakeside property. Dominic watched each face closely, his expression unreadable while inside remorse and suspicion warred violently. He had trusted these men for years. One of them had betrayed him, feeding information to Victor Kane. The thought filled him with gnawing torment. How many times had his paranoia born from childhood poverty pushed away genuine loyalty? Meanwhile, in the penthouse, tension simmered. Sophie and Mia played with crayons at the low table, their drawings spreading across the floor like colorful maps of hope. Sophie sketched a tall man in a black suit holding a little girl's hand under a bright sun. Mia added cautious details, her distrust softening but not gone. "He seems nice now," Mia admitted quietly one evening, "but rich men can change. My aunt lost her job because someone powerful wanted the building for something else. We had to move twice in 1 year." Lily listened from the kitchen, preparing a simple meal from the stocked refrigerator. Her thin hands moved with practiced care, still unused to having more than enough. She remained at times desperate in memory, impoverished in spirit from years of powerlessness, skipping meals, so Sophie could eat enduring, humiliating lines at assistance offices, only to be turned away for missing a single form, sleeping on a deveray. The floor when the landlord cut power without warning during cold nights. The October wind outside the thick glass seemed distant now, yet its memory lingered, making her feel small and guarded. Confusion and fear still flickered when she thought of Dominic's world, yet overwhelming trust and attachment burned passionately from the first night he had protected them. His quiet strength stirred deep curiosity, and a fierce hope that left her dizzy with disorientation, at times numbness from the rapid shift between extreme poverty and this sudden safety. Dominic arrived that evening as golden light faded from the skyline. He found the girls in the play area. He had quietly arranged a small corner with books and art supplies. Sophie looked up with a bright smile. "Mr. Dominic, we made a family picture. See, that's you keeping us safe." The innocent words struck him like a physical blow. He crouched down, examining the crayon lines with unexpected gentleness. Inside, violent inner conflict escalated. Remorse for the isolated man he had become clashed with the healing warmth of the child's trust. He had escaped poverty through ruthless determination, building wealth that could command cities. Yet these 2 vulnerable girls, one brave enough to warn a stranger, the other loyal despite her own hardships, reminded him of everything he had lost along the way. The attachment he felt toward Sophie was passionate and intense, a protective fatherly instinct that burned from the moment of her warning. It terrified him. It tore at his heart with shocking force. Later, after the girls were tucked into bed, Dominic and Lily shared a quiet moment on the balcony overlooking the river. The October air carried a crisp chill, but the heated space kept it at bay. Lily's voice was soft and timid when she spoke. "Mr. Vittorio, Sophie talks about you like you're already family. It confuses me. We come from nothing. Cold nights, empty plates, landlords who changed locks when we were 3 days late. I worked until my feet bled, and still we had nothing. Why protect us so much?" Dominic looked at the city lights, his jaw tightening. The disparity between his penthouse empire and Lily's years of humiliating poverty made remorse surge violently. He saw her thin frame, the exhaustion etched in her face from sleep-deprived nights and malnourished days. "Because your daughter showed me more courage than most men in my world," he said quietly, "and because I know what it is to be cold and powerless." The conversation deepened in the condensed emotional stillness. Lily felt waves of shock and deep disorientation. Dizziness made her grip the railing. She had endured so many absurdly unfair events, Wages cut without notice, assistance denied for minor technicalities, watching other children with warm coats, while Sophie wore faded hand-me-downs. Now this powerful man offered protection that felt like a dream. Fear and anxiety still lingered, but overwhelming trust and attachment grew stronger, passionate, and burning. She who had once been desperately poor now stood protected by wealth beyond imagination. The inner tearing left her numb and confused yet hopeful. The next morning, Dominic moved the group to a more secure estate in the Hudson Valley, a hidden property with high walls, manicured grounds, a small garden, and a wooden swing set he had arranged overnight. The main house offered spacious rooms filled with light, far from the probing eyes of the city. As they settled in, Dominic set the final elements of his trap in motion. Word of the supposed new safe-house locations spread carefully through controlled channels. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, painting the estate in golden hues, Sophie sat with Dominic on the back patio. She held a new drawing, her small voice soft and polite. "Mr. Dominic, I have to tell you something important. I found old pictures and letters Mommy hid. I've known for a long time that you're my real daddy. I prayed you would find us and save us from being cold and scared." The revelation hit Dominic like a second bullet. Extreme psychological shock froze him in place. His steel-gray eyes widened as violent inner conflict exploded within him. This child, the brave girl who had warned him, was his own biological daughter. He had a child he never knew existed, raised in extreme poverty while he built an empire of wealth and power. Gnawing remorse tore through him with brutal force. Remorse for every cold night Sophie and Lily had endured, every humiliating moment of hunger and powerlessness, every unfair hardship that could have been prevented if he had known. The burning protective attachment he felt surged even more intensely, now layered with fierce fatherly love and guilt that left him numb and disoriented. How had his world of shadows kept him from his own blood? The disparity crushed him, his limitless resources against the thin, malnourished life his daughter had known. Lily, standing nearby, felt horror and anxiety crash over her. Dizziness made her reach for the wall. She had tried to contact him years ago, but had been blocked by those in his circle, who feared any weakness in the boss. Confusion and deep disorientation left her voice trembling when she spoke softly. "I never meant to hide it forever. I was scared. We had nothing. I thought you would never want us." Dominic rose slowly, his powerful frame trembling with restrained emotion. Inside the storm raged violently remorse for missed years, passionate determination to protect his daughter at any cost, and a profound healing ache as Sophie's innocent trust began mending the wounds of his lonely heart. He knelt before Sophie, his voice rough with feeling. "You are my daughter. I will protect you with everything I have. No more cold nights. No more fear." In the background, reports came in from the streets. Kane's men had taken the bait at one of the false locations, leading to tense, bold confrontations in shadowed industrial zones, sharp verbal exchanges, and strategic positioning that heightened suspense without open violence. Dominic's men held firm, turning the trap against the rival faction. That night, as the estate fell into quiet stillness under the October stars, Dominic sat with Sophie curled against his side. Mr. Bear clutched in her small hands. The shocking biological revelation had escalated the drama, tearing at everyone's inner worlds with confusing, numbing force. Lily watched them, tears in her eyes, her heart a storm of fear, gratitude, and growing attachment. The powerful man who commanded wealth now carried the weight of fatherhood he never expected, and the fierce resolve to heal the wounds his absence had caused. The escalation had begun in earnest. Kane's threat loomed larger, yet in this hidden estate, a father's bond with his daughter had ignited promising light amid the gathering shadows. The hidden estate in the Hudson Valley lay quiet under the crisp October sky of 2025, its high stone walls and security cameras standing sentinel against the gathering darkness. Manicured grounds stretched out beneath ancient trees, and the small wooden swing set Dominic had installed creaked gently in the evening breeze. Inside the main house, warm lights glowed from spacious rooms filled with comforts that still felt like a dream to Lily Harper. Yet the air carried an unspoken tension, the knowledge that Victor Kane's relentless search for the child witness continued beyond the walls. Dominic had chosen to stay at the estate that night, a decision born from instinct rather than logic. He could not rest easily in his Manhattan penthouse, while Sophie and Lily remained vulnerable. The shocking revelation that Sophie was his biological daughter had intensified every emotion within him. Gnawing remorse tore at his heart with increasing violence, remorse for every cold, wind-filled night his daughter had endured in their cramped Queen's apartment, while he commanded wealth that could have shielded her. He had risen from the freezing tenements of Bensonhurst, through sheer will and power, building an empire of construction unions and underground networks. Now that same power had drawn danger straight to his own blood. The passionate protective attachment he felt toward Sophie burned fiercer than ever, a fatherly love clashing violently with the guilt of years lost. He sat in the study reviewing security reports, his steel-gray eyes shadowed by the inner storm. Lily moved through the house with quiet grace, still thin and malnourished from years of desperate poverty. She had endured too many humiliating nights sleeping on the floor, when the heat failed, rationing every crumb so Sophie could eat, walking long distances in threadbare shoes, because subway fare was a luxury she could not afford. Landlords had changed locks without mercy when rent was late by mere days. Assistants' offices had turned her away for minor paperwork errors. Each absurdly unfair event had stripped her bare, leaving her powerless, sleep-deprived, and drowning in silent torment. In this estate of abundance, stocked kitchens, soft beds, heated rooms that banished the October chill, she felt guarded and fearful, yet curious and increasingly trusting. The overwhelming attachment to Dominic, burning from the first night of protection, left her dizzy with disorientation at times. She who had known only hardship now stood under the shelter of a powerful man who looked at her daughter with genuine care. Sophie and Mia slept soundly in their shared room, Mr. Bear tucked beside Sophie, and a new stuffed animal for Mia. The two girls had grown closer in the safety of the estate, their laughter a fragile light against the shadows outside. The first sign of trouble came as silence. The guards on the outer perimeter stopped checking in. Radios fell dead, one by one. Security cameras flickered and went dark. Someone had breached the system. Dominic was on his feet instantly, his pistol-drawn senses sharpened by decades of survival. He moved through the darkened hallways with lethal grace, heart pounding not with fear for himself, but with fierce protectiveness for the children upstairs. Gunshots cracked the night air in the distance. Sharp, controlled exchanges. Kane's men had come. 12 figures in dark tactical gear swarmed the walls from multiple directions. Tense confrontations erupted at the perimeter. Dominic's security team exchanged firm verbal warnings and strategic positioning with the intruders in the shadowed grounds, bold standoffs that heightened suspense, without descending into chaotic violence. Kane's scouts had located one of the false leads earlier, but tonight they struck directly, driven by the rivals' rage over the failed poisoning and the missing witness. Thomas burst into the girls' room, his voice calm but urgent. "Follow me now. Safe room in the basement. Move." Lily woke with a start, horror flooding her as she clutched Sophie. Anxiety made her chest tighten painfully. She scooped her daughter into her arms, feeling the girl's thin frame tremble against her own malnourished body. Mia woke beside them, eyes wide with fear. The three hurried down the back staircase behind Thomas, the sounds of breaking glass and heavy footsteps echoing through the house. Lily's mind spun with deep disorientation, dizziness and numbness spreading through her limbs. How had their pitiful life of cold winds and empty cupboards led to this night of armed danger? The unfairness tore at her violently. She had sacrificed everything for Sophie, only to bring her into the crossfire of powerful men. Dominic intercepted them at the top of the stairs, emerging from the shadows like a guardian force. His presence filled the corridor with commanding strength. "This way," he said, taking point. 3 intruders appeared at the bottom of the stairs. Sharp words were exchanged in the tense darkness, Dominic's men issuing clear commands to stand down. A brief, controlled confrontation ended with the threats neutralized without unnecessary bloodshed. They reached the reinforced safe room hidden behind a false wall in the basement. The heavy steel door swung open. "Inside, both of you," Dominic ordered, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. Lily hesitated, looking back at him with fear and heightened curiosity. "What about you? I'll hold them here. Go." His steel-gray eyes met hers, carrying the weight of his violent inner conflict. Remorse for the danger his life had brought to his own daughter clashed with fierce determination to protect her at any cost. The passionate fatherly attachment burned hotter than ever. Lily stepped inside with Sophie and Mia, the door ceiling shut behind them. In the condensed emotional stillness of the reinforced chamber, she held the girls close, her soft voice, murmuring gentle reassurances even as anxiety tore at her heart. Sophie whispered, "Mommy, is Mr. Dominic going to be okay?" The question pierced Lily with fresh pain, the child already seeing him as a father figure. Outside, the assault intensified. Dominic and Thomas held the narrow corridor, their movements precise and coordinated. More of Kane's men pressed forward, leading to bold, unexpected confrontations in the basement hallways, tense verbal challenges and strategic positioning that kept the intruders at bay. Marcus arrived with reinforcements, shifting the balance. The drama escalated, confusing and numbing in its intensity as gunfire echoed distantly. Then one intruder slipped through a shadow that had played dead among the fallen. He rose behind Dominic, weapon raised not at the boss but toward the safe room door. Time slowed. Dominic saw the threat in horrifying clarity. Without hesitation, he threw himself into the path of danger. The impact spun him around, a searing pain exploding through his left shoulder. He hit the ground, hard vision blurring, but the shot meant for the safe room had been deflected. Thomas's quick action neutralized the final threat. Silence fell like a heavy shroud over the basement. Marcus rushed to Dominic's side, pressing hands against the wound. "Stay with me, boss." The safe room door opened. Grace No Lily emerged with a scream of horror, Sophie and Mia running behind her. Sophie's small face appeared above Dominic, tear-streaked and terrified. "You're bleeding. Because of me." Dominic managed a weak smile through the pain. "Worth it," he whispered. The fatherly love surged with violent intensity, remorse for missed years, mixing with profound gratitude that this child, his daughter, was safe. The inner tearing reached new depths. He who had known poverty's helplessness now lay wounded, protecting the family he never knew he had. In the master bedroom, the private physician worked swiftly on Dominic's shoulder. The bullet had passed through, cleanly missing vital structures. Lily assisted with steady hands, despite her trembling fingers passing instruments and holding gauze. Her thin frame still carried the marks of years of malnourishment and sleep deprivation. She felt shock and deep disorientation, numbness spreading as she realized how close they had come to losing everything. Yet the overwhelming trust and attachment toward Dominic burned passionately. This powerful man had taken a bullet for her daughter, for his daughter. The disparity left her heart aching. His wealth could command the best care, while she had once begged clinics for help with Sophie's fevers. Sophie refused to leave Dominic's side. She curled at the foot of the bed, small fingers wrapped around his uninjured hand. "You can't die," she whispered. "You promised to keep us safe. You're my daddy now." Mia, after initial hesitation, sat beside her friend. The earlier distrust had fully melted into quiet acceptance. "You saved us," she said softly to Dominic. "Like a real hero. I was wrong about you." Dominic looked at the two girls, his vision hazy from pain and medication. Extreme psychological shock from the revelation of fatherhood mixed with the physical wound, yet the children's innocent presence brought the first waves of emotional healing. Their kindness, Sophie holding his hand and telling stories in her timid voice, Mia offering a drawing of the estate, mended something deep inside him. Remorse for his hardened life clashed with gratitude. He had escaped poverty through power, but these vulnerable children were teaching him the true meaning of strength. Lily sat beside the bed long into the night, her voice soft and polite when she spoke. "You didn't have to risk yourself like that." Inside violent inner conflict raged horror at the danger, anxiety for the future, yet a passionate surge of trust and attachment that left her numb with emotion. She, who had endured so many cold, humiliating nights of powerlessness, now witnessed a powerful man bleed for her child. The unfairness of her past life made the moment even more profound. In quiet, condensed emotional stillness, as dawn approached, Dominic squeezed Sophie's hand gently. "I won't leave you," he promised. The father-child bond deepened dramatically through the life-threatening night. The girl's presence healed not only his physical wound, but the emotional scars of isolation and remorse. Outside, the estate was secured once more. Kane's failed assault had cost him men, and exposed weaknesses, leading to further tense confrontations in distant streets, as Dominic's network pushed back strategically. The drama had escalated, tearing at every heart with confusing, numbing force. Yet, in the master bedroom, amid pain and uncertainty, healing had begun. A powerful man's heart, once locked in solitude, felt the gentle touch of a child's love, and the first true light after decades of darkness. The Hudson Valley estate basked in the soft autumn light of late October in 2025, its manicured grounds and sturdy stone walls offering a fragile sense of peace after the terrifying assault. The wooden swing set stood quietly beneath the old oak tree, and the small garden bloomed with late flowers that Sophie and Mia visited daily. Inside the main house, the master bedroom had become a sanctuary of recovery for Dominic Vittorio. His left shoulder was heavily bandaged, the pain a constant reminder of the bullet he had taken to shield his daughter. Yet the physical wound paled beside the deeper emotional storm raging within him. Dominic sat propped against pillows, his powerful frame still commanding even in vulnerability. His wealth surrounded them with increasing intensity, the private physician on call around the clock, the finest medical supplies delivered without question. The estate's security reinforced with additional teams that moved like silent guardians. He could command resources that most people could never dream of, yet the contrast with Lily and the girl's past life tore at him violently. He remembered too well the freezing nights in Bensonhurst, tenements, the gnawing hunger, the thin blankets that offered no warmth against the wind. Now his own daughter had lived that same desperate poverty, thin and malnourished, sleeping on a thin mattress on the floor, enduring cold October nights while he sat in penthouses overlooking the glittering city. Gnawing remorse clawed deeper with every passing hour. How had he not known the violent inner conflict between the ruthless man who had built an empire through power and fear, and the father awakening inside him left him numb and disoriented? Sophie rarely left his side. The 6-year-old curled beside him on the wide bed, her small fingers gently holding his uninjured hand. She spoke in her soft, timid voice, polite even in her worry. "Does it hurt a lot, Daddy? I can read to you if you want." "Mr. Bear says stories help when you're sad." The word daddy from her lips struck Dominic with extreme psychological shock every time. Passionate, fatherly love burned intensely from the moment of the revelation, clashing violently with remorse for the years he had missed. He had escaped poverty through sheer will rising to control vast construction unions and underground networks across New York. Politicians sought his favor. Entire blocks paid tribute. Yet his own child had suffered hunger and cold, while he accumulated wealth beyond measure. The disparity left him breathless with guilt. Lily assisted the doctor with steady hands, though her thin frame still showed the marks of years of extreme poverty. She had endured too many humiliating nights, skipping meals so Sophie could eat walking long distances in shoes with holes. Because bus fare was unaffordable, facing landlords who changed locks without mercy when rent was late by mere days. Assistance offices had turned her away for minor paperwork issues. Each absurdly unfair event had left her powerless, sleep-deprived, and drowning in quiet despair. In this estate of abundance, she felt guarded and fearful at times, yet curiosity and overwhelming trust grew stronger. The attachment she felt toward Dominic, passionate and burning from the first night of protection, deepened into something profound. She saw the way he looked at Sophie, and her heart ached with a mixture of gratitude and lingering anxiety. One quiet afternoon, as golden light streamed through the tall windows, Sophie climbed carefully into Dominic's lap, mindful of his injury. She held a new crayon drawing of the estate. The swing set the garden, and 3 figures holding hands. "This is us," she said softly. "You, me, and Mommy. And Mia, too. We're a family now, right?" Dominic's voice grew rough with emotion as he studied the simple lines. "Yes, little one. We are." The father-child bond deepened in these tender moments. Sophie's innocent kindness, reading children's books in her timid voice, drawing pictures to cheer him, asking gentle questions about why his eyes sometimes looked sad, began healing the emotional wounds he had carried for decades. He who had known only betrayal and isolation felt the walls around his heart crack further with every small act of trust from his daughter. Mia, once so distrustful, had undergone her own quiet transformation. She sat nearby, coloring beside Sophie, occasionally offering shy observations. "You really did save us that night," she told Dominic one evening. "I thought all powerful men were scary. But you took the hurt for Sophie. That makes you different." Her words carried the weight of a child who had known hardship, unreliable homes, skipped meals, the fear of being forgotten. Witnessing Dominic's genuine care had become an emotional turning point for her, softening her heart and adding layers of healing to the household. Lily watched these interactions with tears she tried to hide. At times she felt deep disorientation, dizziness, and numbness washing over her when she remembered their old life of cold winds and empty cupboards. She had been so desperate and powerless, enduring humiliating poverty while raising Sophie alone. Now she witnessed a powerful man whose wealth could reshape lives with a word, allowing her daughter to heal him in return. The inner tearing grew increasingly intense, confusing, and violently pulling at her emotions. Suspicion had long since given way to passionate, overwhelming trust and attachment. She spoke to him in her soft, timid voice. "You didn't have to risk everything for us. We had nothing to give." Dominic met her eyes, his steel-gray gaze carrying profound depth. "You gave me something I never knew. I needed a chance to be more than the man the streets made me." The drama escalated quietly in the background. Reports from the city told of continued tense confrontations with Victor Kane's faction. Dominic's men encountered scouts in unexpected locations, bold verbal standoffs near waterfront warehouses, sharp exchanges of warnings in shadowed alleys, strategic positioning that kept Kane's people off balance without open violence. Each encounter heightened the suspense, reminding everyone that the rivals' anger over the failed assassination and the exposed witness still burned. Then came the second shocking twist. During a routine medical check prompted by the stress of the assault and Dominic's injury, the physician requested additional tests for Sophie. The results arrived quietly one morning while the estate lay bathed in soft autumn sunlight. The doctor spoke privately with Dominic and Lily, first his voice measured. Sophie had a serious but treatable congenital heart condition that had gone undiagnosed due to Lily's inability to afford regular medical care. The years of malnourishment and the constant strain of poverty had worsened the situation, though early intervention could manage it well. The news struck like a second bullet. Dominic felt extreme psychological shock ripple through him. His daughter, his own flesh and blood, had suffered in silence because of poverty he could have prevented. Violent inner conflict exploded within him, gnawing remorse for every cold night, every skipped meal, every humiliating denial of care that Lily had faced alone. He who commanded vast wealth had unknowingly left his child vulnerable to a condition that could have been monitored from birth. The fatherly love he felt surged with passionate intensity, clashing violently with guilt that left him numb and disoriented. How many times had Sophie felt pain or fatigue that he could have eased Lily's reaction was one of pure horror and anxiety. Dizziness made the room tilt. Numbness spread through her limbs as deep disorientation took hold. She had tried so hard working until exhaustion, sacrificing her own meals, enduring absurdly unfair hardships, like being turned away from clinics for lack of insurance or funds. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke soft and polite even in her pain. "I didn't know. I couldn't afford the tests. We barely had enough for food some months. The cold nights, the worry. I thought it was just tiredness." Sophie, sensing the heavy atmosphere, climbed into Dominic's lap once more. "Am I sick?" she asked in her timid voice. "Will you still keep me safe?" Dominic pulled her close with his good arm, his voice thick with emotion. "Always. You are my daughter. I will make sure you get the best care." No more suffering in silence. In the quiet, condensed emotional stillness that followed the family gathered in the sunlit room, Sophie held Mr. Bear tightly while Dominic explained gently that doctors would help her heart grow stronger. Mia sat beside her friend, offering quiet support. Lily watched them, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. The disparity between their past life of powerlessness and this moment of protection left her heart aching with violent intensity. She had endured too many nights of cold wind and humiliation. Now, a powerful man whose empire could move mountains vowed to heal what poverty had damaged. The father-child bond deepened dramatically through this new trial. Sophie's innocent trust her small hand in Dominic's. Her drawings of Daddy making me better brought waves of healing to his tormented heart. He felt the remorse and guilt transform slowly into fierce determination. The man who had known only isolation now found purpose in protecting and raising his daughter. Outside the estate, Kane's frustration led to more tense street confrontations in distant boroughs, bold exchanges of warnings, and strategic maneuvers that kept the rival faction off balance. The drama continued to escalate, tearing at every heart with confusing, numbing force. Yet in the Hudson Valley light, a powerful father's emotional wounds began to mend through the gentle kindness of his daughter and the quiet strength of the woman who had raised her alone. The second shocking twist had brought fresh pain, but it also forged an even stronger bond, one rooted in compassion, responsibility, and the healing power of a child's love. The Hudson Valley estate remained wrapped in the golden hues of late October, in 2025, its high stone walls and reinforced security offering a temporary fortress against the storm gathering beyond. Inside the sunlit master bedroom, Dominic Vittorio continued his slow recovery, his bandaged shoulder, a visible reminder of the night he had thrown himself between danger and his daughter. The private physician visited daily, and the estate's resources ensured every comfort: soft linens, nourishing meals, and quiet spaces, where the October light filtered through tall windows like a gentle promise of healing. Yet the atmosphere carried an undercurrent of escalating tension. Victor Kane's anger over the failed assassination and the exposed witness had not faded. Reports from the city spoke of continued probing by the rival faction, with tense confrontations unfolding in shadowed industrial zones and waterfront alleys, bold verbal standoffs, and strategic positioning, where Dominic's men delivered firm warnings without crossing into open violence. Dominic sat at the edge of the bed, his powerful frame still radiating authority despite the injury. His steel-gray eyes reflected the inner storm that raged with ever-increasing intensity. The shocking revelation that Sophie was his biological daughter, followed by the discovery of her untreated heart condition, had torn open wounds he thought long scarred over. Gnawing remorse clawed at him. Violently remorse for every cold, wind-filled night his daughter had endured in their cramped Queen's apartment, every skipped meal Lily had suffered, so Sophie could eat every humiliating denial of medical care because poverty left them powerless. He had escaped the freezing tenements of Bensonhurst through ruthless determination, building an empire that controlled vast construction unions and underground gambling networks across New York. Politicians sought his favors. Entire neighborhoods paid tribute. His wealth was displayed with crushing intensity in every detail of the estate: the private medical team, the reinforced security, the abundance that could have prevented years of suffering. yet he had unknowingly left his own child vulnerable. The violent emotional conflict between the hardened man who had survived through fear and the father awakening inside him left him numb and disoriented, the inner tearing growing more brutal with each passing hour. Sophie sat beside him, her small body pressed carefully against his uninjured side. Mr. Bear clutched in her arms. She drew quietly, her crayon moving across paper in careful strokes. "Look, Daddy," she said in her soft, timid voice, polite even in her worry. "This is you making my heart strong. And Mommy smiling because we're safe now." The innocent words struck Dominic with fresh psychological shock. Passionate, fatherly love surged through him, burning intensely from the moment he had learned the truth. It clashed violently with the remorse that threatened to overwhelm him. He pulled her closer, his voice rough with emotion. "I will make it strong, little one. I promise." Lily stood near the window watching them. Her thin frame still bore the visible marks of years of extreme poverty, malnourished thinness, the exhaustion of too many sleep-deprived nights, the quiet humiliation of enduring cold October winds in a coat too thin to block the chill. She had faced so many absurdly unfair events. Wages cut without notice when the restaurant reduced shifts, assistants' offices turning her away for missing a single document, landlords changing locks when rent was late by mere days, forcing her and Sophie to spend nights in shelters where drafts cut through thin blankets. Each blow had left her desperate and powerless, her voice often reduced to soft, timid politeness when pleading with those who held power over their fragile survival. Now, in this world of marble and light, she felt a confusing mixture of guarded fear and deepening trust. The overwhelming attachment she felt toward Dominic, passionate and intense from the first night of protection, left her dizzy with disorientation at times. She who had known only hardship now witnessed a powerful man pouring his resources and heart into healing what poverty had broken. The disparity crushed her emotionally, his limitless wealth against the years she had spent rationing every crumb and walking in shoes with holes. In the quiet, condensed, emotional stillness of the afternoon, Dominic called Marcus for a private update. The news was grim. One of the false safe-house locations had drawn Kane's men into a bold confrontation near an abandoned industrial site. Sharp words had been exchanged, veiled threats, delivered, and strategic positioning, maintained all without escalating to unnecessary violence, but the message was clear. Kane was growing more desperate and dangerous. Dominic's jaw tightened as he absorbed the report. The inner tearing intensified. His empire, built to escape poverty's grip, had nearly destroyed the one innocent life that mattered most, his own daughter. Then came the deeper layer of betrayal. Under the emotional pressure of Sophie's diagnosis and the recent assault, Lily finally confessed a painful truth she had carried for years. Her voice was soft and trembling as she spoke to Dominic in the privacy of the study, her hands twisting together. "Years ago, when Sophie was born, I tried to reach you. I sent letters through people I thought were safe, but someone in your circle blocked them. They said any weakness like a child would make you vulnerable. I was turned away, threatened even. I was so scared, so poor. I had nothing but Sophie, and the cold nights were getting worse. I stopped trying because I thought it would only bring more danger." The confession hit Dominic with extreme psychological shock. He felt the room tilt as violent inner conflict exploded within him. One of his own trusted men, someone from the inner circle, had intercepted Lily's attempts to connect him with his daughter. The betrayal cut deeper than Vanessa's poisoning or Kane's assault. Remorse surged like a tidal wave, remorse for the paranoia that had poisoned his world for the years. Sophie had suffered unnecessarily for the humiliating poverty Lily had endured alone while he sat atop an empire of wealth. The passionate, protective love he felt toward Lily and Sophie burned even hotter now, laced with fierce guilt. He who had once been desperately poor himself had unknowingly allowed his own organization to perpetuate the same suffering on his flesh and blood. The inner tearing became almost unbearable, confusing, numbing, and violently ripping at his soul. Lily watched his reaction with anxiety and fear flickering across her face. She felt deep disorientation, dizziness, making her reach for the back of a chair. "I didn't know who to trust. I was powerless, just a waitress trying to keep my baby warm. Every unfair thing that happened, the lost jobs, the denied help, the cold nights when Sophie cried from hunger, I carried alone." Dominic rose slowly, crossing to her. His voice was quiet but filled with resolve. "That betrayal ends now. No one will ever keep me from my family again." Inside the conflict raged the powerful man who commanded loyalty across New York, now confronted the cost of the fear he had instilled in others. His wealth could have changed everything years ago. The disparity left him breathless with remorse. The drama escalated further when Marcus returned with confirmation. The secondary trader, a mid-level advisor who had feared any softness in the boss, had been identified through careful investigation. Dominic confronted the man in a tense, controlled meeting at the estate's secure annex. Sharp words were exchanged, the advisor's excuses falling flat against Dominic's quiet fury. No violence occurred, only a firm, decisive removal from the organization and a clear message sent through the network. The stakes heightened as word spread. Kane now knew the witness was under heavy protection, and the rivals' frustration led to more bold street confrontations in distant boroughs, unexpected encounters where Dominic's men delivered stern warnings and maintained strategic pressure without escalation. In the quiet aftermath, the family gathered in the living room as evening light faded. Sophie leaned against Dominic's good side, drawing a new picture of Daddy fixing everything. Mia sat nearby, her earlier distrust fully replaced by quiet acceptance. Lily watched them, her heart a storm of emotions. She felt the violent intensity of years of inner torment, the humiliation of poverty, the fear of never being enough, the shock of sudden protection. Yet overwhelming trust and attachment toward Dominic burned passionately. This powerful man whose empire could crush enemies now knelt to tie Sophie's shoelaces and listened to her timid stories with genuine care. Dominic held Sophie close, the father-child bond deepening with every breath. The shocking layers of betrayal had torn his world apart, but they had also forged something stronger, a fierce commitment to protect and raise his daughter, to heal the wounds poverty and secrecy had inflicted. Remorse and guilt still raged inside him, but they were slowly transforming into purpose. As night fell over the estate, the October stars appeared overhead. The inner worlds of each character had been violently torn and reshaped. Lily felt the confusing numbness of her rapid shift from desperate poverty to protected safety. Dominic carried the weight of fatherhood and exposed betrayals. Sophie and Mia brought innocent light through their trust and drawings. The stakes had been heightened. Kane's threat loomed larger. Yet in the quiet stillness of the estate, a powerful man's heart was learning that true strength lay not only in empire, but in the gentle courage of a child and the resilient love of a mother who had endured everything alone. The crisp October nights of 2025 grew colder over the Hudson Valley estate. Yet inside its fortified walls, a fragile warmth had begun to take root. Dominic Vittorio moved through the final stages of recovery, with determined focus. His bandaged shoulder a visible scar from the night he had shielded his daughter. The estate's resources continued to display his immense wealth with striking intensity. The private medical team on constant call, the reinforced security details that patrolled the grounds like silent shadows, the abundance of nourishing food and warm clothing that stood in brutal contrast to the years of desperate poverty Lily and Sophie had endured. Dominic commanded an empire built on construction unions and underground networks that spanned the 5 boroughs. Politicians sought his influence, and entire blocks operated under his protection. Yet the inner storm within him raged with ever greater violence. The revelation of Sophie as his biological daughter, combined with the discovery of her heart condition and the exposed internal betrayal, had torn open wounds that refused to close. Gnawing remorse clawed at him relentlessly. Remorse for every cold, wind-filled night his child had shivered in their tiny Queens apartment while he sat in luxurious penthouses. He remembered too well his own childhood in the freezing Bensonhurst tenements, the hunger that never fully left the thin blankets that offered no defense against winter drafts. He had escaped that helplessness through power and calculated fear, rising until he controlled vast resources. Now that same power had nearly destroyed the one innocent life that mattered most. The passionate fatherly attachment he felt towards Sophie burned with fierce intensity, clashing violently with guilt that left him numb and disoriented. Every tender moment with his daughter deepened the conflict, her soft, timid voice calling him daddy, her crayon drawings of us safe together, her small hand holding his during quiet evenings. Lily moved through the estate with quiet grace, her thin frame still bearing the marks of years of extreme poverty. She had endured too many humiliating hardships, skipping meals so Sophie could eat, walking long distances in shoes worn through because bus fare was unaffordable, facing landlords who changed locks without mercy when rent was late by mere days. Assistance had been denied repeatedly for minor paperwork issues, leaving her desperate and powerless. Sleep came in exhausted fragments after double shifts, her body malnourished and constantly weary. In this world of marble floors and heated rooms that banished the October chill, she often felt confused and guarded, waves of anxiety washing over her. Yet the overwhelming trust and attachment toward Dominic, passionate and burning from the first night of protection, had grown into something profound and steady. She spoke to him in her soft, timid voice, polite even when emotions ran high. "You carry so much for us." "I was nothing. Just a waitress trying to keep my daughter from the cold wind. Now you bleed for her." Dominic's response carried the weight of his inner turmoil. You carried her alone through years I should have shared. That ends now. The drama escalated as intelligence confirmed Victor Kane's growing desperation. The rival boss, furious over the failed poisoning and the loss of his planted traitor, prepared one final push. Dominic made the calculated decision to end the threat decisively. He would not wait for another assault on the estate. Instead, he would bring the confrontation to Kane on his own terms. The operation unfolded under the cover of a cold October night. Dominic's men moved with precision through the shadowed streets of an abandoned Brooklyn industrial zone, Kane's primary warehouse operation hidden among rusted structures and empty lots. Tense, bold confrontations marked the approach Dominic's teams encountered. Kane's outer scouts in dimly lit alleys exchanging sharp verbal warnings and strategic positioning that maintained pressure without unnecessary violence. Kane's men attempted to probe for weaknesses, issuing veiled threats about the child witness. But Dominic's forces held firm, turning the rival's aggression back upon itself. Dominic led the inner team personally, his injured shoulder still aching but his resolve unbreakable. In the heart of the warehouse, a final intense standoff occurred. Kane himself stood surrounded by his remaining loyalists, his face twisted with rage. Sharp words flew between the two powerful men, accusations of betrayal, demands for the witness, and firm declarations that the war ended tonight. No excessive violence marred the scene. Instead, it was a battle of calculated moves, controlled positioning, and unyielding authority. Dominic's superior intelligence and the loyalty of his inner circle proved decisive. Kane's operation crumbled as his men, facing overwhelming strategic pressure, began to surrender or flee. Kane was taken into custody alive. Dominic chose justice over vengeance, ensuring the rival would face long-term legal consequences through carefully prepared evidence and connections that would dismantle his network permanently. The rival's empire would crumble in prison, a fate far more lasting than a quick end. As Kane was led away, Dominic felt a profound shift. The violent inner conflict that had defined him for years, the remorse of his violent past, the guilt of missed years with Sophie began to ease. He had protected his daughter not through blind rage, but through restraint and strategy, influenced by her innocent courage. Back at the estate, the news arrived as dawn broke over the Hudson Valley. Lily stood at the window watching the first light touch the trees, her heart a storm of emotions. She had endured so many absurdly unfair events in her life, lost jobs without notice, denied medical help for Sophie cold nights when the wind cut through thin walls, and she held her daughter close to share body heat. The humiliation of poverty had left her thin, malnourished, and sleep-deprived for years. Now the man who had taken a bullet for her child had ended the threat that had haunted them. Confusion and deep disorientation still flickered at times, making her dizzy with the rapid change from powerlessness to safety. Yet the passionate attachment and trust she felt toward Dominic burned steadily, a quiet anchor in the storm. Sophie and Mia woke to the news. Sophie climbed into Dominic's lap as soon as he returned, her small arms wrapping around him carefully. "You stopped the bad man," she whispered in her timid voice. "You kept your promise." Mia stood beside her, her earlier distrust fully replaced by quiet admiration. "You really are a hero. Not the scary kind." Dominic held his daughter close, the father-child bond reaching a powerful new depth. The remorse and guilt that had torn at him so violently now transformed into fierce purpose. He would raise Sophie as his own, ensuring she never knew another cold night or moment of fear. The passionate, protective love he felt had become the guiding force of his life. In the quiet, condensed, emotional stillness of the morning light, the family gathered around a simple breakfast table. Lily's voice was soft and polite as she spoke. "Thank you for choosing us. For choosing her." Dominic looked at the three of them, his daughter, her loyal friend, and the resilient mother who had carried them through years of hardship. The disparity between his wealth and their past suffering no longer only brought remorse. It now fueled his determination to build something better. The inner tearing remained, but it was slowly giving way to healing. The climactic confrontation had ended in victory, not through unchecked violence, but through calculated justice and the influence of a small girl's courage. Kane's threat was neutralized. The family could breathe freely for the first time. Yet the deepest resolution still lay ahead. The full acceptance of fatherhood and the creation of a true home where a once lonely, powerful man could finally find the light he had long denied himself. The Hudson Valley estate glowed softly under the late October sun of 2025, its stone walls and quiet gardens now truly a home rather than a fortress. The wooden swing set swayed gently in the breeze, and the small garden bloomed with the last flowers of the season. Inside the spacious house, laughter echoed through rooms once filled only with cautious silence. Dominic Vittorio stood on the back patio, his shoulder healed enough to move without pain, watching Sophie and Mia play with simple joy. His wealth surrounded them with quiet intensity. The secure grounds, the warm clothes that replaced threadbare hand-me-downs, the abundant meals that erased memories of empty cupboards. Yet the true richness lay not in marble or security, but in the transformation unfolding before his eyes. Dominic's heart carried an inner storm that had only grown more intense in the weeks following the confrontation. Gnawing remorse still visited him in quiet moments. Remorse for the years Sophie had lived in extreme poverty, thin and malnourished, enduring cold winds that whistled through cracked windows while he commanded empires of construction unions and underground networks. He remembered his own desperate childhood in Bensonhurst, the helplessness that had driven him to build power through fear. Now, as a wealthy and powerful man, he felt violent emotional conflict between the isolated king he had been and the father he was becoming. The passionate, protective love he felt for Sophie burned fiercely from the moment she had whispered her warning. It had deepened into a profound fatherly bond that healed old wounds and filled the hollow ache he had carried for decades. Wealth and poverty could not separate love and compassion. They only highlighted how deeply human connection could bridge any divide, regardless of skin color or circumstance. Sophie ran to him, her small arms wrapping around his legs. "Daddy, push me on the swing." Her voice remained soft and timid, polite even in excitement. Dominic lifted her gently, the simple act filling him with overwhelming emotion. He pushed the swing in slow, steady arcs, listening to her laughter. In these quiet, condensed moments of emotional stillness, the father-child bond reached its fullest expression. Sophie's innocent kindness, her drawings, her questions, her unwavering trust had taught him that true strength lay in vulnerability and care. Lily watched from the doorway, her thin frame now gaining healthy color from proper rest and nourishment. She had once been desperately impoverished, powerless against landlords who changed locks without warning, assistance offices that turned her away for minor reasons, and long nights of cold wind when she sacrificed her own warmth for Sophie. The humiliation of those years still brought tears when she remembered them. Yet now she felt a profound, passionate attachment to the man who had protected them. From initial suspicion and fear, an overwhelming trust had grown intense and burning, showing that compassion could bloom even between worlds of extreme wealth and crushing poverty. Love knew no barriers of skin color or social standing. It simply recognized another human heart in need. Mia played beside Sophie, her earlier distrust completely replaced by warm acceptance. She had seen firsthand how Dominic's kindness extended beyond his own daughter, offering support to her own struggling family. The two girls represented the healing power of innocence, their laughter, a gentle education in empathy and second chances. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Dominic gathered everyone on the patio for a simple American backyard meal: hot dogs on the grill and warm apple pie Lily had helped prepare. In this moment of quiet joy, he knelt before Sophie, his powerful frame humbled by emotion. "You saved me first with your courage," he said, voice thick. "Now I choose to be your father every single day. No more fear, no more cold nights. You are my family, and I will raise you with all the love and protection you deserve." Sophie threw her arms around his neck. "I love you, Daddy." The words broke something final inside Dominic. Violent inner conflict gave way to profound peace. Remorse for the past transformed into grateful purpose. He had learned that real power was not in controlling territory, but in protecting innocence and choosing compassion. Wealth and poverty could never separate hearts willing to love across divides. In the gentle October twilight, the family sat together, the girls' laughter mixing with the rustle of leaves. Dominic reflected silently on the journey. Every unreasonable hardship Lily had faced, the hunger, the sleepless worry, the humiliating powerlessness had led to this moment of redemption. The story carried deep life lessons about the knowledge that courage can come from the smallest voices, the lesson that kindness heals even the hardest hearts, and the education found in choosing family over fear. It taught the knowledge that true strength lies in vulnerability, the lesson that love transcends all backgrounds, and the education of protecting the innocent regardless of circumstance. Viewers could find the knowledge that one brave act can change everything, the lesson that compassion bridges any gap, and the education that healing begins when we open our hearts. As the stars appeared overhead, Dominic looked at Lily with quiet gratitude. "Thank you for raising her with such love. We build this family together now." Lily's eyes shone with tears of joy. The overwhelming attachment she felt had become a steady light. Wealth and poverty could not separate love and compassion. They only made the bridge between them more beautiful. And so the story reminds us all of the knowledge that light can emerge from darkness, the lesson that courage changes lives, and the education of choosing kindness every day. It teaches the knowledge that family is built through choice, and sacrifice the lesson that no one is beyond redemption, and the education found in embracing humanity across all divides. We wish everyone watching this video good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this heartfelt tale. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with others so we can bring many more engaging videos every day. How did this story make you feel? How does it connect to your own real-life experiences of courage, kindness, or unexpected second chances? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. The creator reads every single one and listens deeply to the emotions from your hearts. Disclaimer: all stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental. Goodbye for now, and we promise to see you again in the next video. Word count: approximately 1,500 words.